Hi, everyone. This is Wade McKittrick, Superintendent at Montevideo Public Schools, and this is the Superintendent Stream. The purpose for today's stream is this is a longer stream, just so you're aware ahead of time. We wanted to be able to bring to you information around our school budget and how the school budgets work, particularly how they work around school referendums. As you know, we've been doing a number of presentations on facilities, so it only made sense that we turn around then and do a little bit more of an in-depth presentation to you on budget and how referendums actually affect the school, from the school to the taxpayers. So to do that, it even made more sense to bring in Matt Hammer from Ehlers Financial. Matt is a municipal advisor, has been working with the district for a number of years. So Matt, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Wade. Good to see everybody. My name's Matt Hammer. Like Wade said, we're the district's municipal advisor, and we worked with the district for a number of years. My background, obviously, I've worked in school districts my entire career, and I've been working with Ehlers for a number of years, along with the Montevideo School District, as we look at overall budget planning, tax planning, and we look at capital projects for the district and how it's going to impact the district's taxpayers. So with that, we're going to get into some information in regards to how the district's overall how schools are funded in Minnesota, along with when districts are looking at capital projects and those types of things or types of projects, how that's going to be funded and where those funding mechanisms and how they'll impact the local taxpayer. So this just gives you a little bit of this is the general fund formula allowance that districts are funded on from the state of Minnesota. And a majority of the funds that districts receive come through state aid. And we'll get to that a little bit later in a pie chart that breaks down where district revenues come from for operations. But the main illustration here is the bottom bar represents where that formula allowance has trended over the last 2 decades. And you can see the top bar here represents the consumer price index or rate of inflation. And the big thing that you'll notice is that the school's funding formula just hasn't kept up with inflation over the period of the last 2 decades. And in fact, as of recently, if we would update this chart, you would see that variance, especially as of the last 2 years, is actually even broadened. So that gap is growing even more, especially as inflation is hitting our economy even more and more. So when we look at operations, most of the district's funding comes through state aid. There is a subset that comes through categorical revenues, but also districts oftentimes have an operating referendum. And in Montevideo's case, you guys receive, the school district receives about $156 per student of additional operating referendum to fund operations in the school district. That comes through a combination of aid and local levy, and about 50% of that is funded through state aid, with the other 50% coming through local levy. The district receives about $275,000 a year of additional revenue to fund programs above what they're receiving through the other formula revenues through the state of Minnesota. This type of revenue is only used for operations. So as we talk about operating referendums and school building bonds, operating referendums are for operations and building bonds are for buildings. And we'll get into that as we kind of move forward with the rest of the presentation. Then the next slide that we have really highlights the district's overall operating budget. So when we think of a district budget, this would be unique from district to district, depending on where you are located in the state and your property tax base. But about 72%, or the orange portion of the pie chart here, represents the aid that Montevideo School District receives. And your fiscal year 2021 budget was a little bit over $22 million in total. About 12% of that's coming through the federal federal revenues. About 8% comes through other local revenues through fees and those types of things. And then you'll notice local property tax or local levy makes up about 8% of the overall pie. So the main illustration here is the vast majority of revenues are funded through the state of Minnesota, and Minnesota as a whole has made it a point to largely fund schools through state aid, with a little bit of local levy also helping school districts to run their schools. But overall, the district's budget to run general fund food service and those community service programs is a little bit over 22 million. Along in that 22 million, there is revenue that we refer to as the long-term facilities maintenance revenue program. And this is a newer phenomenon. It's been around for about 5 to 7 years now. And before that time, this revenue stream really didn't exist. Some districts received some deferred maintenance revenue to the tune, in Montevideo's case, was probably right around $150,000 to $200,000 annually of revenue. And then you did have some revenue through your operating capital budget. But this funding mechanism came into play to really dedicate funds towards deferred maintenance that didn't exist for districts previously. They had to figure out how to fund those means through their regular operations. And that was a step in the right direction, but districts similar to Montevideo have just had a backlog of projects that have built up over time as you look to maintain programs, fund staff, try to fund deferred maintenance needs, make sure kids can get transported to and from school. All those things that go into running a school when you think of that right around $22 million budget that the district has. This funding mechanism represents about $670,000 annually for Montevideo School District. So it's a little bit of money, but as Wade can attest, that the projects that need to get funded from a maintenance perspective on an ongoing basis can eat up that funding stream pretty quickly.
Yeah, boy, Matt, even just like this summer, I was sharing with somebody recently, just simply to replace 2 sets of doors at the middle school and a set of doors at the high school, and then do a little bit of concrete patching on the sidewalks out front. That shoot up about $80,000 of that LTFM dollars. So those things that have a big impact on facilities is difficult. It definitely is set aside to be able to do, a number of smaller projects, or to put it in the bank over a long term and try to address a few of the bigger things. But it definitely doesn't cover everything that needs to be done.
Right, exactly. So when it comes to looking at even larger capital projects, when you have that buildup of deferred maintenance needs or roofing projects, being able to replace windows, all those things that you as a homeowner are looking to do as you try to maintain your home as well. Districts really have the stream that they have to go out and try to access is voter approved building bonds. And those authorities really have a broad authority, and what ends up happening is districts issue school building bonds to get upfront cash to take care of those projects all upfront, and then repay those bond proceeds, similar to a home mortgage over a period of years, or a home equity line of credit when you're looking at trying to update your facility. Those programs we'll talk a little bit more. Montevideo is unique that you do qualify for some debt equalization aid, but also we're going to spend a little bit of time and just highlighting a program that came into place starting with Taxes Payable 2018 with the Ag to School credit. So as we think about who pays the taxes and how taxes are collected per state statute, this gives you an illustration of the distribution of taxes in the Montevideo School District. And this would be unique to any municipality or school district across the state. The the column on the left, or the market value, the far left, when I'm looking at those numbers in the percentage base, residential home property makes up about 25% of the district's overall market value. As we go down, you'll see the largest subset is ag property, or tillable land, at 58.6%. Those two, that market value is assessed by the county assessors and then used to create two tax bases by the county auditor every year. And as we scroll to the right, the referendum market value is where the district's voter approved operating referendum is spread. And then there's three other taxes that are spread on that tax base: equity revenue, local optional revenue, and transition revenue. The vast majority of taxes are spread on the net tax capacity tax base, and that includes all property. So as you look at an operating referendum or a referendum market value levy, you'll notice that seasonal rec and qualifying ag land is excluded. But when we look at most school taxes, including building bonds, those are spread on net tax capacity, and the residential homeowner picks up about 22% of those types of taxes versus 60% on a referendum market value levy. And then you can see the qualifying ag land makes up about 50% of the net tax capacity levies. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that breakdown happens when we talk specifically about building bonds and how the ag credit is helping to mitigate those taxes on those ag property owners. So the school building bond agricultural credit is a program that the district has taxpayers have been seeing relief from starting with taxes payable 2018. And it's one of the few programs at the legislative level that has received some bipartisan support. And I think that's really important to point out as you kind of think about what has happened with this program since it initially came into law in 2017 and was first impacting property owners starting with taxes payable 2018. I'll just give you an overview of what the school building, or who qualifies. So this is any property owner that has Class 2A, 2B, or 2C. So you can see most property in Montevideo is going to be agricultural tillable land. Both homestead and non-homestead property qualify. Rural vacant land, which is oftentimes like hunting land, will be classified as rural vacant land. 2B qualifies, and then managed forest land as well. But that isn't going to affect Montevideo very much. That mostly affects northern school districts. The credit has been phasing in since taxes payable 2018. It was initially approved at a 40% level. And it was at that level for taxes payable 2018 and 2019. And then in the legislative session of 2019, Congress in Minnesota decided that they were going to expand it even further, again with bipartisan support. And that phase in now has been happening, and it is fully actually phased in with taxes payable 23. So in taxes payable 20, it was at the 50% level, 21 at 55%. Last tax year 22 at 60%, and now starting with taxes payable 23, this next tax year it'll be at 70% fully phased in. I also think it's somewhat important to point out is that this actually had some traction at the legislative level again last cycle, and there was a bill that was if anything would have happened with the tax bill this last cycle, it would have been expanded to 85%. And as we all know, nothing happened at the legislative level this last cycle, and that would have been starting with taxes payable 24. The important thing there to point out is that there is a recognition, specifically in districts like Montevideo, where you have a lot of qualifying ag land, to try to mitigate that burden on the ag property owner. And it's something that people are recognizing was a burden for school districts like Montevideo that had such a concentration of property owners paying a large chunk of those bills when districts needed to go out and fund facilities like this. The credit is, you don't have to apply for the credit. It automatically shows up in your tax statement. So it's already been, taxpayers in the district have been receiving that credit on the district's existing debt service levies already, and would receive it on any future debt service levies as well. So it's been a great program for school districts across the state, and ag property owners specifically themselves, to get some relief in districts like Montevideo.
Matt, you bring up a great point, because it's a question I've gotten several times, is what happens if that goes away? Well, I think the reality is it's not going to go away. When you talk about the ag to school credit being bipartisan, there's just not that many things that have that much bipartisan support. So to think that might roll back away, I really think is unrealistic. That's a pretty set program.
Right. And the only traction it's had is to actually expand, not retract. So I think that's an important piece of the whole picture too.
Great.
So what does this mean then for debt service taxes at a high level for the Montevideo School District? The district has about 50% of its property that's qualifying ag land. So at the 70% level, that means any debt service tax or debt service levy is going to get funded at 36% through state aid, through the state's general fund, which vast majority of those taxes are obviously coming out of the 7-county metro area. So it's an important piece, and you can see this is the breakdown on those debt service taxes. About 32% are coming through residential or other. Commercial picks up about 16% of that through local levy, and then the ag property owner is picking up 16% of the levies. State aid on the ag credit making up about 36%. And we're going to talk a little bit more about it on another program as we get into more of the project specifics as we move forward. Agricultural property in Chippewa County, this is often a question that we get in regards to assessed values in the school district. And oftentimes people are thinking of what property is selling for, and this is actually what it's being assessed and taxed at. So this is actually assessments for 22, which will be the basis for setting taxes for 23 when people actually are paying their taxes. And the average acre in the townships in the Chippewa County for the Montevideo School District, that average is a little bit over $7,000 per acre. So $7,242 is the average acre on a residential or on tillable land. And then the average farm is based on census data that we have is about not quite 550 acres in total.
So when somebody when you hear about ag land being purchased for $10,000-$11,000 an acre, that really doesn't have any relevance as far as the tax base goes.
Right. Yep. So this is your assessed value by the county is going to really determine how you pay your taxes in this case. And oftentimes you'll be hearing that properties are selling for higher than they're being taxed at.
Yeah.
So when we look at this is residential homestead and house and garage in 1 acre. So an ag property owner pays taxes similar to a residential home on their house, garage, and 1 acre of property. And if we would take a residential homestead or HDA, house, garage, and 1 acre at $125,000 level and stuck it into any one of these communities, this is what that home would pay. So Montevideo is right in the middle right now, based on taxes for 22. And you can see the comparison districts here, a lot of the neighbors, and kind of how the Montevideo School District compares at this point in time. This is another slide just kind of illustrating the ag to school credit and its phase in. So you can see that reduction that's been happening, and this has been happening on the district's existing debt service levies. So if we look at a homestead acre valued at $7,300 per acre, on a per acre basis, back pre-egg credit, they were paying about $3.80. And now with a full phase in at 70%, that tax burden has been significantly relieved on egg property owners, and we're down to about 72 cents per acre versus that 380 that would have been that egg property owner would have been paying pre-egg credit. So we'll start talking some specifics now on the plan that's been recommended. As we look at a $59.3 million bond issue, the important thing here to kind of illustrate is that the Montevideo School District also qualifies for debt equalization aid. And because of your tax base and tax base makeup and existing levies, the district is going to qualify for some aid that's going to provide relief to all taxpayers in the community. And that's through the debt equalization program. And as we look at the total state aid that would be contributed to a project at the $59.3 million level, when we combine the two aid programs, you're looking at about 45% of the debt service levies will be funded through the state of Minnesota. And then that breakdown of the rest of the properties, you can see the burden has been limited in those cases and too. So that green section really represents state aid from the Department of Revenue and Department of Education, and then the other the gray, the blue, and the orange, that represents local levy and who's paying those taxes at the Montevideo School District. So the important thing here, about 50%, not quite 50%, is going to be funded through the state of Minnesota.
And this 59.3 million, this is based on the plan that we put together that we've been sharing out. We've had several informational meetings over the last few weeks, and sharing out that plan in the stop, look, and listen meetings, and getting feedback from people on what the plan. Are we on the right track? Are we not on the right track? So we thought it was really important to be able to put the number for that project up and be able to see what that total impact is. So what I hear you saying, Matt, of that $59.3 million, if you do the math, from 45% is picked up by the state, and in full disclosure, right? That's the state gets their money from taxes.
Right.
So it's money that it's taxes that from the state level that are going to offset some of these costs, of which we pay part of those taxes.
Right.
But as one legislator told me, those taxes are going to be collected regardless. So it's just a matter of where you want to have them spent. So as I look at Montevideo in our school district, I'd like to see some of that revenue from the state side coming out to our community, as opposed to staying in the 6 county metro area. And so just again, it's not like it's free money that's just growing on a tree. It is tax dollars, but they're going to be allocated somewhere. So why not to Montevideo? But when you do that math, that 45%, that means that takes down a $59.3 million referendum down to what's being assessed locally, down to about 32.6.
Right.
So that, I think those numbers are, I like numbers, so those are interesting to see.
Yeah, so then this next slide incorporates just some estimated tax impact information based on different property type classifications. And these numbers do include the estimated aid that the district's receiving through the 2 programs. So for an egg homestead and egg non-homestead, those are accounting for the egg to school credit. And for the other property owners, the debt, or all property owners, the debt equalization aid is part of those numbers. So if we look at a $150,000 home, that's an annual tax impact estimate of about $350 a year, $348 to be exact. And then on a per acre basis, you can see that based on egg homestead and non-homestead. So non-homestead property for egg property pays twice the rate of homestead property in the when you take a look at that levy for an egg property owner.
And then there's a second part of that presentation that we've been showing out to people. The first has to do with the academic portion, and the second part has to do with the Fine Arts Center. We're trying to be really clear with people, Matt, that just because we're breaking it out this way right now doesn't mean if we were to go to a referendum question that it would necessarily be a 2-question referendum. It might be a 1 question. It just depends on what the feedback is. And that's also the importance of filling out that survey that went out to every box holder in the district, is based on the feedback that we get from our community. That's going to determine how this is all structured. But we wanted people to be able to see specifically, what does a Fine Arts Center cost, and how would that impact tax-wise as well? So we broke that out for people, and the estimated cost is $11.4 million.
Yeah, and this really takes a look at combining the two. And like Wade said, this doesn't necessarily mean this was the way it would lay in the end. But when we look at the adding $11.4 million to the bond amount, you can see the state aid amount goes up a little bit, because you're going to qualify, the district's going to qualify for a little bit more debt equalization aid, and we're closer to that 47% level as that debt service levy goes up. And then the breakdown on the other categories are very similar. So again, about 47 or 45 to 47% of aid through the state of Minnesota, even with the larger bond amount. And then this just looks at the additional annual tax impact for adding that $11.4 million for the Fine Arts Center. And you can see the additional annual tax increase that we're estimating at this point in time. $150,000 home, not quite $50 a year. And then the impacts on the rest of the property type classifications as well. So the last thing we always like to just make sure that we make people aware of are the tax refund programs, and there's also a deferral program in here as well. And as we always talk to the Department of Revenue, these programs are being underutilized and not fully utilized by property owners. The programs require forms to be filled out every year, and those forms are actually due in August each year, which is a different timing than most of your taxes filings are being required. But the Homestead Credit Refund Program is often referred to as the circuit breaker program, because it does have an income limitation on it. And it's based on a number of factors, including household income in total, as well as your property value. That special property tax refund, that's actually a one-time refund. And if your property taxes go up by more than 12% and $100 from the prior year, you can qualify for that program. And that doesn't have an income limitation, so anybody can qualify for that program. And then the final program is a senior citizens property tax deferral. It's just a deferral program that allows people over age 65 with an income of less than $60,000 to defer a portion of their income tax to a future year. So I think it's important for people to make sure that they're aware of these programs, and you should probably be I want people to just take a look at them anyway, even outside of the referendum, to make sure if you're a qualifying property owner that you're taking advantage of that right now, if you're not doing that.
Now, these programs are there for a reason, and like you said, Matt, they're drastically underutilized, and we want to just make sure we're providing that information, folks, so you can do what you would like to do with it, but sure encourage you to take a look at it. It's a possibility. It's a way of saving a little money.
Yes.
So folks, we want to say thank you, Matt. Thank you for taking the time to go through that. That was just a ton of information that you presented. It's very sometimes it's hard for many of us to look at that tax structure and figure out what it actually means. So you make it pretty easy to understand. So thanks for that, Matt.
Yeah, always. Thank you for having us.
So we hope you found this information helpful. And I just want to say thank you for taking time to view this stream. And until next time, it's a great day to be a Thunderhawk.